I'm gonna say that means it did.
Yes, I think we're in recording.
All right, so I just want to welcome everybody to probably the most important workshop we're having this summer. This was not on the original conference list that we took virtual, but this is part of the what do we really need right now in this time and space. And so Cindy was kind enough to say, you know, I'll put that together for you. I can do that. So we really appreciate it. Cindy is the principal at Cindy Leonard Consulting, and she and I met 4 years ago, I'm going to guess, at when she worked at the Bear Center, which is a nonprofit capacity building program out of Robert Morris University. So in Pittsburgh, and working with Allegheny County nonprofits. I always say they were kind of like our what we hoped we could be someday, right? We have a staff of 1.25, and they had I think when we met, you had a staff of 10. So since then, Cindy has, as she did before, worked in lots of different roles in nonprofits, and has decided to hang out her shingle, as they say, and become an independent consultant. And we're glad of it, because we've been able to use her skills and expertise more this summer than we ever have before. So Cindy, I think I'll just let you take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Amy. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Amy and Nonprofits Lead for having me here today.
Find
really
the speaker.
Happy about that. Is there a way to mute participants, Amy, so we don't end up with background noise?
Yep, okay. I'm on it.
And then we'll unmute them for the Q&A part, but
okay.
Just for now. So welcome to the workshop. This session is called Managing Your Time, Managing Yourself, and Making Remote Work Easier. So as Amy said, my name's Cindy Leonard. I have been doing consulting as a sideline gig for probably 20 years, along with working in nonprofits. I started as an office manager in the late 90s, and I've done practically, not quite everything you can do, but a lot of things you can do in nonprofit world. I've been an IT director, I've been a board member, I've been a board chair, a program director. When I left the Bear Center, I was an executive director for 1.5 years. And I left there in March for personal reasons, and decided to go back to the consulting work that I did for 12 years when I was working at the Bear Center, and really, really loved and missed. I went to the Bear Center because I was an IT director at a nonprofit before that. And I went to the Bear Center because I wanted to help more than one nonprofit. And after 1.5 years as an executive director, I started to get that itch again. You know, I was working with the same organization day in, day out, and it just started to get tedious. I did not know that the COVID-19 situation would happen a week after I left my job. That was probably not the most brilliant career move I've ever done, but you know, it is what it is, and there we go. So why I like to do this session, three reasons. First reason, I am a self-admitted recovering pack rat. I used to save everything, and I mean everything. At one point in my life, probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I literally had every pair of socks I think I had ever bought since I was a teenager, because I kept them in really good shape. And they were a million colors, and because I was an 80s teenager, our socks had to match our t-shirts or our shirts. And I kept these all in a drawer, color-coded. But the only thing you wear these days are black socks or white socks for like 20 years now. But I just couldn't give them away. And I discovered minimalist lifestyle about 10 years ago, and it really changed a lot for me. Second reason I like to give this class is I am a world-class procrastinator. The Irish, I love this saying, the Irish like to say, why put off until tomorrow, which you could put off until the day after tomorrow. And that is an instinct in me to, I can do that tomorrow. I can do that tomorrow. It'll be all right. And it's something that I have to fight every single day of my life. And I have since I was very young. And ironically, despite all this, I'm that person at the office that everybody gets annoyed by because they're so organized. Everybody's like, oh, you're so organized. You make me sick. But the reason I got like that, the reason I became like that and taught myself to be like that is because it's the only way I know to juggle a million things at once. And make no mistake, life is about juggling a million things at once. And if you're a nonprofit person and it just gets worse the higher up the chain you go in management, life is about juggling a lot of things at once. I had no idea until I became an executive director how hard that job really was. How many things hit your face every single day. It's incredible. So before we start the thing, I would love if everybody would open up their chat. Make sure your chat box is open because I'm going to be asking questions. And the way you can do that is if you hover down near the bottom of the Zoom screen, you should see chat, or you can use Alt-H on your keyboard and open up chat. So the first thing I like to do is I would love it if everybody, I'd like to get a sense of who's in the room and what it is that you do at a nonprofit. So if you could, I see Susan like, amen, sister. You got it. If everybody could type in your job title in the chat, that would be really great. I'd love to see what everybody does. So go ahead and take a minute and just put your job title in. We'll see what comes up there. We got all kinds of roles in here. A lot of managers. All kinds of roles. That's terrific. Thank you for that. That's super. Yeah, we've got from all over the place, all kinds of things. Thank you for that. That's super. Okay, so moving along. So we talk about managing time, but I added managing yourself in the title of this webinar because I truly believe you cannot actually manage time itself. Now, this slide, you may remember a movie named Click that had Adam Sandler in it's probably been a while since that movie came out. But if you remember the movie, if you've seen it, you know the premise. If you haven't, he found this magical remote control in the movie that let him stop time. He could click and everything would pause. He could rewind and do things again. He could fast forward and see the future. Wouldn't it be great if you could actually alter time that way? Wouldn't that be fantastic? But as it is, we cannot add or delete minutes, hours, or dates. We can't rewind. We can't fast forward. Therefore, I always say you cannot really manage time itself. What you can manage is yourself and how you use that time. So really, it's kind of self-management that's going on. So given that truth, you alone have the power to change your life in this regard. You may have heard the speaker, Tony Robbins, say, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And ironically, he kind of stole that from Einstein, who said it years before in the quote you see here. And he said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But how many times do we do that? We repeat behaviors that we know don't work. I spent my 20s dating the same kind of guy over and over and over again, to heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And it wasn't until I changed my husband, the guy I finally married, completely different kind of guy. And that finally worked. So for your life to change, you have to change it. And today I'm going to give you ideas that you can test and if you try. And the reason I'm saying this about doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is with everything and anything I'm going to tell you today, what I want to implore upon you is if the ideas work, keep doing them. If they don't work for you, don't be afraid to either tweak them or completely discard them. Not everything is going to work for every person when it comes to workload and self-management tricks and tips. So here's what we're going to go into today. I've got 4 sections to this webinar: workload management, clutter, thinking, turning thinking into doing, and remote work tips, which is a new addition to this webinar that I've given as an in-person class before. Because so many people are stuck working at home right now, and it's a whole different, there are some things about that are a game changer, and you really have to rethink some of the things that you do. Okay, so we're going to get first into workload management. First of all, first thing I want to get something out of the way. We talk about multitasking. Half the job description, more than half of the job descriptions that I see in the world say, must be able to multitask in a fast-paced environment. Well, fast-paced environment is just silly because everybody's fast-paced. That's not even a thing. But the idea of multitasking is actually a myth. Multitasking means you're literally able to do more than one thing at a time. And the human brain, according to research, is incapable of actually multitasking. What we're actually doing is switch tasking. And switch tasking is rapidly moving our attention between one or more items. And we may look like we're multitasking, but we really aren't. So when you switch tasks, it actually takes longer to get each thing done. For example, let's say I'm trying to type an email while I'm on the phone with a client. And let's say this whole process actually takes me 20 minutes to have that conversation and do the email, because I keep slowing down the phone call because I'm not completely paying attention, or I have to have the client repeat themselves because I wasn't paying good enough attention. If I had just taken some time to type the email first, that might have been 3 to 5 minutes. The phone call might have been 5 minutes. That's a total of 10 minutes or less to do both things because I approached them one at a time. I read a bit of research once that said that it takes 15 to 17 minutes for the human brain to get back into a project when we switch tasks. So is it any wonder we have days where we end the day, and go ahead in the chat box if you would, I'd love to hear. Tell me if you've ever had a day like this. You work your butt off all day, you get to the end of the day, you're exhausted, but you can't remember a single thing that you've done. I've had so many days like that myself. That's because we're switch tasking all day, every day. So what I'd like you to do is practice putting your focus on one task at a time. If you're working on a project and a phone call comes in, let it roll to voicemail. That's what it's for. Check it when you're done. Try to keep your email closed if you can while doing project or intense work, like if you're writing a grant or working on something that's a very specific, you're designing a program or something that really requires heavy concentration. And especially turn off those notifications that pop up on your screen that says, you have a new email, you have a new email. Those you're getting interrupted every time you see one of those. It's taking you away from what you're doing. If you're really, really focusing, silence the ringer on your phone. Use do not disturb setting if you have it on your office phone. If something is seriously super that important, somebody will track you down. I used to worry about, they call it fear of missing out. I used to worry about this for a long time. And I learned years ago that if it's something that serious, you will be notified somehow. For example, I was at work a few years back, probably 5 years ago, and my dad had a heart attack. But I was in the middle of work, and I tend to not answer my cell phone too much if it's personal when I'm at work. So I ignored the first vibration of the cell phone in my pocket altogether. And when the second vibration came a few seconds later, I ignored that because my mom simply texted, give me a call. And she does that all the time. So finally, I get this phone call from my husband, who I always take his calls. He was at work, and I picked up, and he's like, you need to call your mom right now. She's freaking out. And so I finally called my mom and found out what was going on. So if something's that crucial and that urgent, people will show up at your office door. People will find a way to let you know that they need you. So the second thing I'm going to talk about in this section is some time management systems and different techniques of time management. I have tried numerous time management systems over the year. Every time when I was trying to figure all this stuff out for myself professionally and personally, I would read book after book after book and Google it and just look for all these different tips and tricks. And what I've come to conclude is that time management systems work really great by the person who designed them. So Stephen Covey, I'm sure his time management system and his tricks are the perfect thing for him. David Allen, who wrote the Getting Things Done, I'm sure his system works perfectly for him. I have found that only bits and parts of every single one are effective for me. So you shouldn't feel badly if you read one of these books or try to follow a system completely and you find that you're struggling. That's okay. You don't have to keep everything. It's okay to keep what works for you and to just discard what doesn't work. And after a while, you'll literally have built your own customized time management system that works for you. Today, I'm going to cover a few techniques that I found to be most useful to me over the years. These are the best of the bunch that I have found to be the most productive in my world and that I've recommended to people over and over. So the first one I just mentioned is this system called Getting Things Done. And this is by a guy named David Allen. I read this book, I think, for the first time probably 12 or 13 years ago. And I've picked pieces out of it for my career and my personal life. And you can see the website down there is gettingthingsdone.com. What I like about this system is it really hits all the essential elements of traditional time management within his particular process. He talks about ways to keep your head clear, processing work and weekly reviews, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Having gathering points, having as few gathering points as possible. And a gathering point are places in your life or on your desk that unresolved items appear. You know, that pile of Post-it notes or that inbox or your email inbox where things pile up, your voicemail, text messages, all those things are gathering points. And the more you have, the harder it is to manage. And he also recommends keeping work and personal separated so there's no confusion or things getting lost. He talks about processing work, project planning in this book, delegating. It's a decent system. And here's the basic premise of the system. He says that David Allen says we spend too much time too little time planning our work, or what he calls processing work, before we dive in and tackle it. We tend to just jump in there without a plan and pick off the first thing on the list or the most urgent thing on the list and go. And then it's one thing after another. One of the things I found to be the most beneficial from his system is this concept of a weekly review. And what you do in the weekly review is you sit down for an hour to 2 hours. And I can tell you, it does get lesser. I can do my weekly review in less than half an hour now because I've got my stuff fairly well under control. But a weekly review, you spend time looking at every single thing that's on your plate and putting it through this diagram that you see here. And it sounds daunting, but once you do it enough, it becomes second nature. You might need the diagram. Amy, I can send this diagram to you so you can email it out to everybody. It's also all over the internet too, but I'll send you a PDF of it. So what you're looking at when you're doing a weekly review is assessing all the different aspects of your work. You're adding things to your task lists, your project plans, tying up loose ends, looking at your calendar, last week coming up, what do I need to follow up from last week? What do I need to prep for the next week? Looking at your projects, any lists that you have, loose papers, all those Post-it notes, your pile of mail, whatever you've got. You're not actually doing work at this time, but you're evaluating your workload. And so, for example, let's say I actually left some stuff on my desk here beside me. And I'm going to put it through this chart. I'm going to grab something and put it through this chart. So the first thing I have is a receipt from Walmart that my husband threw on my desk last night. Okay, so this is stuff. This is a thing. This is stuff. So at the top of the chart, what is this? It's stuff. Is it actionable? In this case, it is actionable because I keep my my checking register in QuickBooks. I'm not quite a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, so we still keep those checking registers. We don't just toss receipts. So I need to open up, is it actionable? Yes, that's the action. What is the next action? So we're right here. The next action is to fire up QuickBooks and input this receipt and then put it in a file. Will it take less than 2 minutes? Yes, then I should probably just do it real quick. If something takes more than 2 minutes, if we go to no, we can either delegate it or we can defer it. So a perfect example of that, it is, I forgot to scoop cat litter on Sunday, like my usual scooping day. And so that is a thing. It is stuff. It's something that needs to be done in my life. I have 5 cats and 5 litter boxes. This is no small task. So my thing is litter scooping. Is this actionable? Absolutely. Now, if I didn't have any litter, no, that might be a problem. We might have to defer that. But yes, it's actionable. The next action is to get my butt in the room and scoop the litter. Will it take less than 2 minutes? Absolutely not. Not with 5 litter boxes. So the answer is no. What can I do about that? I could try to delegate it. I could try to sweet talk my husband into doing it for me. He's the only choice I have for delegation. Or I can defer it. I can put it on my calendar and say, okay, I'm going to do it Friday or Saturday. Or I can put it on a next actions list, a task list. You know, maybe I'll put it on my Saturday task list. These are the things I'm doing today. Other things that happen with stuff, sometimes if it's not actionable, sometimes it's just, you know, it's informational. So, or it's junk mail, so you put it in the trash, or it's something that's, oh, that'd be so great. You know, I used to, when I was an executive director, I used to get people's event postcards and marketing postcards and flyers and really cool looking annual reports and all this different literature in the mail, because everybody mails you things when you're in ED. And I would save, I had a folder, a someday maybe folder for marketing materials, because I would see something that was like, oh, that's so cool. I want ours to look like that. So I'd save them. And then some things you just need to keep for reference, just because you might need it someday. So other things, so going back to, is this actionable? If it's an actionable item, what's the next action? It might be an action over here where it's part of a project and you need to include the action for this thing on in your projects folder, in your project plans, and your lists. A project and project management, we're not going into today because that's a whole nother webinar, whole nother ballgame. But the reason this is split into either projects or will it take less than 2 minutes is because if something has more than one step, it's going to take more than 2 minutes, and it is a project. If something is a single step item, that's the quick stuff that you can put over here that takes less than 2 minutes, or try to delegate it or defer it. I highly recommend checking out the book and the system. I dug around last night. I found out that the book retails for $10.89 new on Amazon, but there are tons of used copies available for around $4. And also, if you go to gettingthingsdone.com and you click on free resources, there's all kinds of articles and useful podcasts that you can check out for absolutely free. Okay, moving on to the second technique that I think is fun and useful.
Hey, Cindy.
Yes.
Can I ask a question about the previous technique?
You sure can. God.
Did you say that's a weekly thing?
Now this is, yep, this is for your weekly review.
And do you usually do it Friday afternoon or Monday morning or a different time?
I'm a Monday morning gal for it. You could certainly do it Friday afternoon if that would help you sleep better over the weekend.
Okay.
I think the important part with it is to pick a time of the week and stick to it. And I've also done a weekly review midweek if I'm having a particularly heinous week with if I start to feel overwhelmed and I've got all this stuff that's piling up on my desk. Sometimes I just need to take 15 minutes and process the junk and all the stuff on my desk. So there's no perfect time to do it. It's what works best for you. I like Monday morning. I actually have an appointment on my calendar for every Monday morning with this weekly review, just to remind myself to do it, because if it's not on my calendar, it's probably not going to happen. Or if it's not written down somewhere, it's not going to happen. Great question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. So second technique, this is called the Pomodoro technique. And this technique actually works. It's not something that it's something that you can use along with the getting things done stuff. Because what this involves is setting a timer and working in short sprints and taking frequent breaks in between so you don't burn out your brain. So as you can see on this chart here, you figure out what you're going to do, what's the task you want to work on, and you set a time, excuse me, you set a timer for 25 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you take a 5-minute break, stretch, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. And then you do this again. So you're repeating, you do what they call 4 Pomodoros in a row. And that's 2 hours of work with 4 short breaks. And then at the end of the 4th round here, you're supposed to stand up and take a 15 to 30-minute break, like take a longer break and really let your brain rest, because this is intense work. So this is a great technique for focusing on tasks in a way that you really get laser focused, but you're not burning out your brain or your body in the process. You're not sitting for hours at your desk and really, really burning the candle at both ends badly. It also gives you dedicated time on tasks that is short enough that you don't have to be as concerned about missing out on other things. So in other words, pretty much any email or phone call can wait for 25 minutes. You know, and for doing this technique, you can use a regular egg timer. You can use an alarm on your cell phone. I found a website that has a Pomodoro timer on the homepage that's free to use. It's tomato-timer.com. If you put tomato timer in the Google search, all kinds of things come up. They used to actually sell, the Pomodoro people actually used to sell an egg timer that was shaped like a tomato. And I don't think they're selling that anymore. They have some resources on their website. Most of what they have are classes to teach you how to use this technique that run around $275 a pop. And for nonprofits, I thought that was a little crazy when you can kind of, this isn't that difficult, you know, I think we could figure this out on our own. So you be the judge of that. But this is a nice system to give a try as well for focusing on work. And finally, another thing that I use heavily and I would recommend is the concept of time boxing. Now, this is really popular in some project management methodologies. The idea is to assign a time period to work on a task or a group of tasks. And instead of working on a task until it's done, you're committing to working on it for a specific amount of time instead. So this screenshot is a calendar from a week back when I was at the Bear Center, where I spent a week doing research and development. I had a particular number of items that I really needed to get some research and development caught up, and I wanted to work on during this week. So I created designated times each day of that week that I wanted to work on each item. And I still use this technique regularly. In this particular instance, I used to have 3 different calendars because I didn't want my coworkers seeing every single thing that I was doing. So my public calendar is the green items. You know, I have the holds and any meetings that I had, and that was the only thing that I wanted my coworkers to see. And then I set up a separate Google Calendar, which you can do right in, if you're using Google Calendar or Outlook, you can actually have multiple calendars. And you can set them to private if you want to, or in the Google Calendar case, just don't share it with anyone. Don't make it public and don't share it. So the red items on this calendar are periods I was spending working on various tasks and projects. And then yellow is personal tasks that I needed to do. And like I said, only I was able to see the red and the yellow calendar items. They weren't public. There are other reasons for scheduling on your calendar like this, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. So this calendar looks a little overwhelming, I know, at first. But speaking of using the resource of time, keeping a calendar as your primary tool for productivity is a really good idea that I highly recommend to everybody. And it's recommended by experts, and I recommend this. Use it to schedule nearly everything, including breaks, appointments, meetings, your days off. Most calendars like Google or Microsoft Office will let you make appointments private if you need to do so, or as you saw in the screen before, you can set up a calendar overlay that you can use for personal scheduling. Whoops, I just lost my video screen, Amy. Oh, there we go. Okay. Be sure to leave enough space between appointments, though. I've seen lots of people, and I've made the mistake myself, where you'll put one meeting up against the other meeting, and that does give you any time to prep for the next meeting or a little post-meeting time to organize your thoughts and notes. You also need travel time. If you're going somewhere, you should put your travel time on your calendar as well. Another recommendation about calendars, don't book something, don't double book something, hoping that one appointment will cancel. That's just asking for trouble, is all that's doing. And you can also, it's good to add deadlines or things that you need to follow up on to your calendar. Now, this example is a fully scheduled calendar on this slide. Like this, whoever did this is not me. This is almost a little extreme, but you can see that travel is scheduled here. So he's got travel by train, or he or she has travel by train. They even went as far as to schedule time to socialize. Free time, play. Guilt-free play is the green, which I thought was kind of comical. Meals are on here, lunch, blogging, breakfast, shopping. I mean, this person really, reading, I'm assuming sleeping is probably on here. Now this is a little extreme for me. I like my evenings to be a little more free form than this, but for your work stuff, this is not a bad thing, not at all. I think it would be useful. So we had a question, can you merge multiple calendars in Outlook? That's a great, I think what you can merge them in the sense that you can view them on the same screen, Susie. I do know that much. Merging them would be actually making them the same calendar. So I don't think you'd want to merge them as much as you would want to have them show up at the same time. If you literally wanted to put two calendars into one, you'd probably have to use you'd have to export one calendar to a file and import it with the other calendar open. And I think that would be true of Gmail as well. So I hope that answers that question. And so as a final point in workload management, let's talk about saying no. So Steve Jobs was really big about the idea that Apple got to be such a great company because they said no to 1,000 things a week and only concentrated on the things and the features with their products that were the most important. And I feel like time management systems don't really spend enough time addressing this issue. We're literally physically and mentally unable, and fiscally and in every way, we're unable to pursue every good idea or opportunity that comes across our desk, even the great ones. We really have to be selective. We have to pick the ideas that will add the most value to our mission and learn how to say no to the others. This is really tricky, especially if you're dealing, I had an 18-person board of directors, and board members are really great about saying, oh, we ought to try that. This would be super. And, you have to learn how to say no gracefully, or at least defer the idea. If you're dealing with a direct report boss or a customer or client, you want to think really hard before saying no. You say no to your boss too many times, that's not going to be good for your career, I think. But even the best meaning people will present you with ideas now and then that simply aren't viable or feasible. To say no to a board member, I always found it's easiest when they come up with something that was kind of out there, and I kind of knew it was a bad idea, or just an idea that we didn't have the money or the time to do anything about, even if it was a super idea. I would ask that board member to head up a temporary committee to do a feasibility study on the idea. And that pretty much eliminates anybody who's popping ideas right off the top of their head and isn't really serious enough to take ownership. My rule of thumb when I was an executive director, whether you were staff or board, is if you came up with an idea, you owned it or it didn't happen. You know, if you have this great idea, you needed to take ownership and pursue that, because one person can't do everything by themselves. You know, you don't want to become that person that everybody dumps the great ideas on their lap because they're crazy enough to be willing to pursue everything. You want to delegate that around. Another graceful way to say no is, or maybe not no, but not now, but maybe later, is to ask that person when they make the request to you. Let's say they come up to you, they come up to you in person or you're on the phone. Ask that person to make the request by sending you an email with the request in it. And that gives you so that you can consider it. Tell them, please email me that idea so I can consider it. And what this does is this buys you time to figure out a diplomatic way to say no to the request, rather than fumbling and stumbling and saying no to them in person, face to face. It buys you a little time. And if you have something that you absolutely cannot say no, at least see if you can negotiate the deadline, if there's a deadline. That's always something you can try to do. It's your job to protect your own time. Time is your most valuable resource in life, in career, and it's your job to protect it. I see Lisa commented, we usually means you. Yes, especially where boards are involved. Yes, that is so true. Okay, so I have a little exercise. I would like everybody to break out a piece of pencil and paper, or if you want, you could just chat it in the chat box. I'm interested in which techniques or ideas you find most appealing and what you think you want to try to incorporate into your current workflow, anything that we just talked about. In fact, let's just type it in the chat box. What do you find? What did you think was the coolest or the most interesting idea? Anybody else? So I see we have some people that are doing some of this stuff already. That's really great. That's really good. Good. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the second thing we're going to talk about is clutter. Yahoo for clutter. So how do we define clutter? How do I define clutter? I define clutter as 1, things you don't need, and 2, things you don't use. And there are 2 kinds of clutter. There's physical clutter and there's mental clutter. So physical clutter is damaging because you have to clean it, you store it, you organize it, or you work around it. So when you look at the desk on this picture, how does that desk make you feel? I look at this desk and I would just want to barf every day coming to work. Too much. I mean, how do you even function? Mental clutter also saps your energy and keeps you from focusing well. I've seen offices worse than this. I've worked with people. Susie says, I'm crying looking at it. Yes. I once worked with a guy who was a music director at a church, and he literally had a path to get to his desk because every single space of his floor had sheet music piled up 4 feet in stacks. Every single place. He had file cabinets he didn't use. He had bookshelves that just kind of had things look like something had been shot out of a cannon at the bookshelves. He couldn't see his desk. The desk was covered. I felt so bad. And he was so overwhelmed. Somehow he knew how to find everything, or at least he thought, but there's no way. There's no way you could find particular music in that kind of stack. So let's talk about first dealing with physical clutter. The trick is to start slowly. Pick one area at a time. This is whether it's at your work, your work office or your house. Declutter one small area at a time. And you can even sit there and make a list of all the cluttered areas if you need to do so. and just pick one. Don't try to do them all. Trying to do them all will be overwhelming and you will stop. You will give up. Another thing you can try is just recycling or giving away or tossing one thing a day. You'd be surprised if you pick one thing a day to get rid of or toss or file, that's 30 things off your desk in a month. Other tricks are, and I've used this for work and home, get a box of things that you think is clutter, things you don't need, things you don't use. Put all that stuff in a box and label it for 6 months or 12 months to be recycled or disposed of or shredded if it's files. Now, when it comes to files, I will say that every company, there are files that have to be legally kept for a certain amount of time for taxes, for legal purposes. When it comes to your files, you do want to be careful about file retention policies. You don't want to toss something just because you don't use it. It might need to be kept. But I'm talking about things that are clutter, printouts, emails, stuff you've saved. Do you really need all that on your desk? Do you use it? So, or in your house even. Do you use every single bit of clothing in your closet? Or everything in your kitchen, which tends to pile up a bunch of stuff too. So label that box to get rid of it in 6 to 12 months, put the date on it. And if you don't open up that box within 6 or 12 months, whatever your deadline was, get rid of it. Don't look, because looking, if you open that box, it's like opening Pandora's box and you will never get rid of it. But just don't look and send it wherever it needs to go. Thrift shop, garbage, disposal, whatever. And don't forget about your electronic files, your email, digital clutter, because that is definitely a thing too. And I will say, if you do nothing else from this webinar, I challenge you to go back to your office and clean your desk. Or go back, you're in your home, you're probably in your home office, so there's probably no going back to your office cleaning your desk. But even cleaning your home office space is a good thing. So remove everything and clean. That's the first step. Give that keyboard a shake, because there's food in it. We've all been sitting above our keyboards eating. I know we have. Sort your stuff that you have. Things that you use the most often, you want to have closest to you. And the stuff you use the least often, you want to put it farther away. Get organizing products if you need to, letter trays, stacking racks. There's all kinds of stuff out there in the world, so many things. And then put the stuff back on your desk so everything you use daily is in arm's reach. Stuff that you use less often is farther away, and the decorative stuff is even farther away from that. And I have, Amy, I have a handout called Keep It or Toss It that I'll send to you as well. I think I still have a copy of that. Okay, so here's an exercise, and we're going to do this in the chat as well. What area of your office needs to be decluttered? We'll just do number 1. So for me, my clutter tends to, I have a table to the side of my desk. Everything tends to pile up on there. So what area of your office needs to be decluttered? Go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you don't have anything, bully for you. Good job. Top of the file cabinet. Yep. All of it. Everybody's got something that has to be decluttered. So we're going to talk about reducing or eliminating mental clutter. And there's a crazy concept. I know we have, no offense to the guys on the call. We have a lot of women on the call because the nonprofit sector is 76% are women. So there's a lot of females. There is literally a difference between the male and female brain that causes females to have more mental clutter. There's this wide, flat bundle of nerves, of neural fibers called the corpus callosum that connects the two halves of everybody's brain, male or female. This bundle of fibers is literally larger in women's brains, and that permits more movement back and forth between hemispheres. And that permits us to have a more frequent change in focus, which was needed back in, this is back from caveman days where the male was feeding the family and needed to be able to focus on the deer or the, whatever it was that they were hunting. and shoot it so they could protect the family. Whereas women were at the home, they had to monitor, you know, the fire, the cooking, the children, the garden, whatever it was. So women's brains developed to be able to switch back and forth faster and more frequently. And so while that makes it easier for us to change frequently in focus, it also gives us noisier brains. You know, if you've ever wondered why you lay awake at night going over your task list in your head instead of falling asleep, like your husband there or your spouse that just goes, you know, they're done. My husband's out like a light 2 minutes after he hits the pillow, not me. It's because of this, literally how our brains are designed, how they have evolved. So one of the great things you can do to get all that stuff out of you want to do a brain dump. You want to get all the things that are out of your head and capture it somewhere. Your brain's not meant to hold everything that you have to do or you want to do. And keeping it all up there is only going to serve to disappoint you in both the short and the long term. So the thing to do is to do a brain dump, take a piece of paper and put some headings on it. Musts, wants, and perhaps. Things you absolutely have to do go in musts. Things you would like to do but aren't critical right now are wants. You know, I'd like to take a vacation without having, you know, I'd like to actually go somewhere on vacation, which I don't think is going to happen until next year, but that's a want. And perhaps is something that maybe someday it's a little less important. Things down the road. So the exercise I usually do with this is I usually do a brain dump, and we're going to do a 2-minute brain dump. Everybody grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, something to write with. And what I would like you to do, you don't have to do the must want. You can do the musts, wants, and perhaps if you want to. What I would like you to do is everything that is in your head right now, every task on your mind, whether it's work or personal, stick it on this piece of paper. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. So I'm setting a timer for 2 minutes. Everything that is on your mind, get on that piece of paper and go. Don't think about it. Just write quickly and get it out of your brain. Okay, you're at the 1 minute mark, 1 minute to go. Don't think about it, just scribble it. Get it out of your head. Okay, stop. That's 2 minutes. So Amy, I'm going to pick on you because you're the video I can see most directly in my screen. Can you unmute yourself? Could you share what the first item, if it's not too personal, share the first item on your list, which you come up with?
Because probably because of the picture that's in front of me is cleaning up the clutter that's on my desk.
Okay, so the thing you want to do with this list, and I'm speaking to everybody, not just you. Once you've got this stuff out of your head, you need to process it through whatever system you're using. So the first question, if you want to use the GTD system, is that an actionable item? Do you have the capabilities to declutter your desk?
Yes.
Okay. Will it take less than 2 minutes?
No.
No. So that becomes a project, right? So we make a project plan for it. We make a list. And so each item on your list, you want to process like that, and get it into whatever system you're using, your calendar, your project management software, or your task lists, or whatever it is that you keep track of work. Okay. Moving on, we're going to talk about changing thinking into doing. So what gets in the way of productivity? What's two big obstacles? Can anybody guess the two things that are the biggest obstacles to productivity? And go ahead and type it in the chat box if you want to guess. One begins with a P and the other begins with a D. Any guesses? Patrice, you got, yep, the first two. Absolutely, you got it. Procrastination and distractions. Good job guessing, you guys. Very nice. So procrastination and distractions. We all know their issues. I love this quote. Tomorrow, noun, a mystical land where 99% of all human productivity, motivation, and achievement is stored. I always got a kick out of that quote. So why do we procrastinate? We know we do it. Why do we do it? There's a lot of reasons that people procrastinate. Resistance to being controlled. I was a very tidy child, very neat. You know, I'm still fairly orderly. It's my nature, even though I tend to save things. I used to save them in a very, very well organized fashion. But the minute my mom said you need to clean your room, don't want to do it, just because I resisted being controlled like that. Sometimes we have a fear of failure. We have perfectionism. We're afraid that we're not going to do something perfect enough, so we resist doing it. Sometimes we have a fear of success. We literally sabotage ourselves because, you know, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I do this and I do it well? How's that going to change my life? Some people like the adrenaline rush, that last minute, and I've talked to plenty of people like this. Oh yeah, I work best at the last minute, like, you know, So we put it off because we want that adrenaline rush. Sometimes we put things off because of sheer ambivalence. It's something that we're not sure we really want to do. We're not really committed to. I bought a 100-year-old house 5 years ago, and it's in good shape, but all the rooms are not the color that's why you see a virtual background here. I started peeling wallpaper and gave up. I have put off and procrastinated painting all the walls in my house because I can't commit to a color scheme. Every time I look at paint chips and I think I know what I want, I look at more colors or something, I see something online, and I change my mind. So I literally in 5 years have not managed to paint a single wall in my house because I'm just not sure. I'm ambivalent about it. And then sometimes depression can literally cause you to procrastinate. And if you find that you're in that state, I seriously recommend that you go see somebody. You know, get some help for that, whether it's a pill or therapy or something like that. And especially with this time with the coronavirus and everybody being so isolated, I think that depression is happening a lot more than usual. So keep an eye on that with yourself so that you don't fall into a trap that's going to take you some work to get out of. But procrastinating is one of the signs of that as well. So how do we overcome this? One way to break the habit of procrastination is to break things down into really small bits of work. So here's a reference to another really old movie. I actually looked this up, and this came out in 1991. Oh my goodness. I bet there's people on the call that were born, you know, right around that time. So this is an oldie but goodie, or a classic movie, I suppose, at this point. But the movie is called What About Bob? And in the movie, if you've not seen it, Richard Dreyfuss there on the right starred as a therapist named Dr. Marvin, and Bill Murray, who is one of the originals from Saturday Night Live, played a guy named Bob, who was a patient with multiple phobias. Like, he literally couldn't leave his house without great difficulty. And what I loved about this is during the movie, Dr. Marvin recommends that what Bob does is break things down into baby steps. instead of thinking about, so he would tell him, he's like, instead of thinking about getting from my office to your apartment, just think about getting from your chair to my office door. And then think about getting from the office door down the hall. And then think about getting down the hall to the elevator. And then from the elevator to the lobby. And this process actually translates really well for working on large or complicated projects. Don't think about everything you have to do. That's overwhelming. If I think about every bit of client work I've got right now, I've got like 9 projects I think going on. If I think about it all at once, I just want to go back to bed. If I think about everything at my house that I need to do, all the renovations, the cleaning, the yard work, I just want to go back to bed or have a glass of wine, one or the other. And I don't get anything done when I think about it all. So the thing to do is to break things into small steps and only focus on the next step. Dale Carnegie, the motivational speaker and writer, he once wrote about putting things every day into an airtight box, which means only focus on the things you will do that day without thinking about the past, the future, yesterday, or tomorrow. I challenge each of you to try that for just one day. You feel really great at the end of the day. I've done this, and I try to do it every day. Some days I forget, but man, the days you accomplish it, you feel really good, not focusing on the past or future, just on what needs to happen today. Let's move on to distractions. So common distractions at the office. So go ahead and hit the chat box there, hit us up. What's your biggest distraction at the office, not your home office? I'm going to ask you that question in a second. So what's your biggest distraction at your office? People, yes. People. Noise, email, people walking into my office, yes. So what is your biggest distraction working remotely, working at home? Kids. Beagles, okay. Emails, kids, child, emails, So we're all facing very similar things. Hunger, food. That's funny. Food is not on my list. That's interesting. Yeah. I actually eat less now that I'm working at home, believe it or not, because we always had goodies in the kitchen at our office, always. And the office wasn't close enough to, the kitchen was farther away from my desk than it is in my house. So, yeah. So interestingly enough, most interruptions, no matter where you are, come from quick questions. And I say that in quotes, quick questions with capital Qs. I read somewhere that interruptions from quick questions literally take up 28% of our workday. And that's whether it's a quick question in person, via email, phone, whatever. 28% of your workday is like losing 1 week a month to briefly answering questions for other people. So when you're thinking about that, if you're a manager and you're dealing with a lot of quick questions, one thing you can do is try to invest in growing your staff to increase their knowledge and their self-confidence in decision making. I had a very non-empowered staff when I started at my last job. The previous director was somewhat of a micromanager, so they had been groomed so that they did not really think for themselves at all. And so I literally had people coming in my first week, managers who had been there for 30 years, saying, I'm going to go to lunch now, is that okay? And coming from a culture where nobody micromanaged anybody, I was just shocked that, somebody who had been a director for 30 years had to ask if it was okay to go to lunch. And so you can imagine if they were that, if they were that indecisive or unable to make that decision on their own, that they were coming to me for like everything, every little decision. Well, we better run it past Cindy. We better run it past the director. So, you need to give people, empower your staff, empower people and make sure they have the knowledge to be able to make their own decisions as much as you can. Another thing is figure out where are the places that you are a bottleneck in office processes. And if your manager, find ways to delegate or otherwise eliminate those bottlenecks if you can. And also look for inefficient processes. When I first started as an executive director, there was no clear process when we would get large grant checks that came in the mail. Obviously, the executive director wants to see those grant checks, but so does the development director and the fiscal person. So like after the office manager would open the mail, sometimes I'd get the check first, sometimes the development, it ended up being, whoever it happened to be addressed to. Or if there was nobody addressed, they would open it and take a good guess. So to eliminate what was going on was, I wrote the grant, so I'm sitting there waiting, where's this check coming? And sometimes it would come to me and I know about it right away. And sometimes it would go to somebody else and I'd be chasing people down, spending time going, hey, did you see that grant check? Oh yeah, that came in. Oh, okay. I didn't see it in QuickBooks or in the donor software. Oh, I haven't got to that yet. It's on a pile on my desk. Well, that's not helpful. So the first thing I did was I established a chain of possession for the process. I told them I wanted all checks to office manager opens it, then I get it, then I send it to the development person, then I send it to the bookkeeper. And things were still being routed incorrectly after that. And I was still spending time finding missing data between QuickBooks and the donor software. And it was really, I was spending more time than I wanted to on something that's should be such a simple process. And so the solution I landed on was a $25 solution. I ordered a custom designed rubber stamp, one of those old like funk rubber stamps. And I had a custom design, so it had 4 position titles on it: office manager, executive director, development director, fiscal manager, and a blank space after it. So each person, when the office manager got it, every piece of mail, I had her stamp it, write the date in after her name or after her title, the date she looked at it, and then send it to me. I would note it, do whatever recording I needed to do, write the date on it, send it to the development director. But the fact that there was that stamp on there enforced that chain, that process. And something that simple saved so much time. So you want to look at things like that. How can I save time by eliminating bottlenecks and looking for inefficient processes? So for other distractions, things you can try, change your office around. Literally, changing your office sometimes can be amazing. Not sitting the door. A couple jobs ago, I had a desk that not only faced the door, it literally looked all the way down the hall. Like I saw everybody coming and going to the copier, to the kitchen, everything. And where I'm not the type of person that I like to sit with my back to the door either, because I'm a screamer. And if you sneak up on me, I will scream all bloody murder, holy hell. So that was not an option either. What I did was I moved my desk 6 inches to the right, so that my chair I was just putting myself out of line of sight, just enough to not see down the hall the whole way. And that made all the difference in the world. Every time somebody walked down the hall, I wasn't looking up because I saw movement. Shut your door. If you have a door to shut, shut your door. If you don't have a door to shut and you're trying to focus, block out noise with headphones. And if you're not a music person, on YouTube, there are all kinds of ambient noise programs. You can listen to the forest, birds chirping, lightning storms, thunderstorms, the ocean, all kinds of stuff that you can Google. Don't be afraid to let things go to voicemail. You have voicemail for a reason. That way you can check it. You don't have to deal with the thing, whatever that call is, right this second. And try to schedule time as far as email and social media goes. Really try to schedule time for that. I try to do email in the morning. What I do, so I don't like to do email in the morning. What I like to do is project work first thing in the morning, because I find if you get in your email inbox, you're stuck there for hours. So I will look at it and see if anything's on fire based on the subject line. Like the first thing I did today was I looked to see, did Amy cancel the webinar? Or is there a change, or is there a glitch, or is there new Zoom information or something I should know? And lacking that, nothing else on fire, I close my inbox and I will deal with it later. So schedule time, especially social media. If you're in charge of managing the social media at your organization, that can suck you down the hole for a long, long, long time. They actually have there are software programs, if you're really bad, that can block your internet access altogether during set periods of time, which aren't always feasible because, you know, if your software's in the cloud and you block the internet, that's not going to help you much. That's mainly for people who can't stay off of social media, I believe. So here's a graphic I absolutely love. This is all over the internet. This is an oldie but goodie. If you do a quick Google search on the title of it, How to Focus in the Age of Distraction, you will find it everywhere. But I just love this because it talks about so many things that we're covering in this webinar. How to work, you know, use a timer, work in focus bursts, creating rituals and habits, managing email, check email at set points during the day, take time to reflect and review, help for addicts, people who have had issues, blocker programs, digital technology detox, and managing your space. So this graphic has a lot of neat reminders on it. Amy, I'll try to remember to find and send this as well in the follow-up. Okay, we have 23 minutes left. I'm going to skip this particular exercise and move on because we don't have a ton of time left, and I do want to leave some time for questions. So the final thing we're going to discuss is remote work tips. So I had a once weekly work at home arrangement at a previous job that lasted for 12 years. I was guaranteed 1 day a week of working at home, of telecommuting. And so I got a lot of working home experience and you know, thinking about how to best work at home from that. And since I left my job in early March to pursue consulting, which was ironically right before the COVID lockdown, I've been working at home since the beginning of March, like many of you. And I never used to cover this topic when teaching the class because not that many people really got to work from home. But since so many people are right now, I thought it would be a good idea to share all the things I've learned over the years that have been helpful. The first thing that I strongly recommend is to have a dedicated space for your work when you're working at home. And this can be a spare room, a desk in your bedroom, a portion of your kitchen table, anything as long as it can be set up as a working space on a permanent basis. Something that where, you know, you're not gonna move it around all the time. Now these pictures are very lovely, but keep in mind, these are from like magazines and these are a little more beautiful than anybody's work at home space is gonna look. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna show you my actual background that I'm embarrassed about. This is my actual house. My bedroom, I have a spare bedroom that I work at home in. And it was, as you can see from the butterflies, it is a child's nursery, Yahoo. And I thought I found a mushy spot on the wall, so I started peeling wallpaper. I do have some drywall that's mushy, but I never got, it's a big project and I gave up. So when I Zoom, I tend to use a virtual background. Sometimes I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise, sometimes I'm at the beach. It just depends on what my mood is. And then I also found this really attractive background that looks like somebody's house that is nice and not mine. But the important part, going back to this, is make sure that you've got a space that can be your work at home space. Have everything you need, equipment, the supplies you'd have at the office, computer, printer, scanner if you need it, office supplies. And you know, don't be afraid to ask your organization for the things you need to work for them. You know, if you're expected to work at home, they need to be providing the office supplies. You shouldn't have to pay for all that yourself. I'm sorry. You don't necessarily have to use a computer for work and a computer for personal use. I've always used my own laptop for everything I do. And I've always done that because I have a really good fast laptop that is better than anything any nonprofit has ever given me. And so I like using it better. But organizational policy is going to dictate very possibly what you use. At my last job, I used my own laptop, but I had a VPN connection, a virtual private network connection to the server that I used to transfer files back and forth. And I had to install the programs on Microsoft Outlook for my email and my calendar access. At the job I had before that, we had virtual desktop software, VMware, that we were required to use in order to gain access. So your organization is going to decide that. You also want to make sure you have a good high-speed internet connection. If your employer doesn't reimburse this for you, or for your cell phone usage for that matter, check into expensing it on your state tax return. I'm in Pennsylvania, so anything that our employer does not reimburse that is required for us for work, we're allowed to expense it on our state taxes. So talk to your tax preparer about that, especially if you're working from home some part of the time. And speaking of your cell phone, I recommend not giving out your personal cell number for business calls. The cell phone number that I publish on my slide deck here and on my website is actually a Google Voice number that forwards calls to my cell via a free app. I went on, it's voice.google.com. I signed up for it with my Google account, and it handles text messaging, phone calls, and voicemails as part of the service, and it's free. Skype will do the same thing, I understand, with a Skype number, but it's a pay service. It's not free. Another thing about working from home is your schedule. Try to set a weekly hours and stick to them as much as possible. Now, one of the great things about working remotely is the flexibility. So, you know, like today I have a doctor's appointment at 12:45. I'm going to run down, 3 miles down the street to the doctor and come back and log back in. Okay. I'm going to make up those hours later in the day. Or so like Friday, I'm going to run downstairs first thing. I'm going to log in. About an hour into it, I'm going to run downstairs, start a load of laundry, run back upstairs. An hour later, run downstairs, put it in the dryer, run back upstairs. These are the great things about working at home. You can do some other stuff, take breaks. The important thing when working at home with a team is to make sure your manager or your team know when you're available, and your shared calendar is the best tool for that. Have a routine in the morning or whenever you start your workday that signals to your brain that you're switching into work mode. It's so easy, because your work and your home are in the same place right now. It's easy to get into work mode or not get into work mode. And then at the end, once you're in work mode, it's easy to not get out of work mode at the end of the day. Most of the time, our commute to work is when we switch into work mode and out of work mode. When your commute is literally walking, like my commute now is walking 10 feet from my bedroom to the other bedroom, that's not enough time to do the switch. So, that may mean you put on some professional clothing. I personally love that I can wear shorts and a t-shirt now, unless I'm doing an online meeting. But, some people, maybe you want to get dressed up a little bit more so you feel more like you're professionally ready for work. Maybe it's you get your cup of coffee and you look at your to-do list or your calendar for the day. Think about what you would try to do in the morning while you're commuting to the job without the travel part, and see if you can recreate that routine as much as you're able. What did you used to do when you got to the office in the morning to get yourself psyched up and ready for the workday? And the other thing I'd recommend is create a similar end of day routine. Process your notes, maybe create your list for tomorrow, shut down your computer, do something that signals that the workday is over. My habit is I put the computer to sleep because chances are I'm going to be Netflixing on it later, so I don't necessarily want to shut it down. But at the end of my workday, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I get a cup of coffee and my dog, and we go sit on the deck for half an hour to an hour. And I just sit there and drink my coffee and think and breathe and relax and enjoy the outside. That's my transition time from work to home, even though I'm technically at home the entire time. So an important thing is to have a conversation with family members about working time and expectations surrounding that time. My husband works second shift, so he tends to be awake for part of my working day, and I love him, but he's noisy and all get out. He likes music and noise, and he talks really loud when he talks on the phone. So we have an agreement. For example, right now for this webinar, I warned him days ago. I was on a webinar. I was giving a webinar Thursday. He is not in our home office that we share. He is somewhere downstairs keeping the dog quiet, and the bedroom door is shut. I have made sure he took his phone with him and any other device that makes noise. So everything that, my phone is on vibrate. I made sure everything, I arranged it so everything that was going to be an issue is out of the way. Another expectation I had to manage early on, a boundary, was just because I'm home all the time doesn't mean I'm automatically going to be the person doing all the domestic stuff. I'm still working. I'm still working a full week. So that doesn't mean I'm doing all the errands. I'm doing all the housework. I'm just because I'm here. That's a conversation you need to have with whoever, if you have a partner and especially if you have kids, you need to have that conversation. Now, if you have kids, you need to make decisions about childcare. I think this may be one of the more challenging aspects of the whole COVID thing because, you can't even take your child to a facility because they're closed, so many of them. But just because you're physically present in the home doesn't mean when you're working that you can care for children at the same time. Assuming we aren't locked down, you may have to find some part-time daycare or family to babysit for some, or maybe even all of your working hours, depending on what your job is. And a lot of that too depends on the age of your kids. If you have older children that can entertain themselves and keep themselves out of trouble, you may be fine having them around and working at home. But the important thing with this is to create the boundaries and have conversations with your partner and your children if they're old enough to understand, rather than just dealing with it and making things work on your own. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't expect that you can be all things to all people, because you can't do that. You've got to take care of yourself too, because you don't want to burn out. Now, there's going to be a different dynamic in terms of supervisor and team expectations. Just like you're not always at your desk at the office, you're not always going to be at your desk at your home office. You still need to take breaks, go to lunch, go to the bathroom, have meetings, even if they are online. So, use your calendar to make sure that people know where you are. And speaking of that, working remotely, it is a fact, requires more communication than you would normally do. So you want to let your team and people know about your schedule and your availability. When you finish a project or important task, let your supervisor and team members know. Over communicating doesn't mean writing long-winded emails explaining every single detail, but it does mean repeating yourself. This little sign on this graphic is meant to be ironic. This is the exact reason for repeating yourself, because people may have ignored or missed your message the first time around. And another thing to remember, when you're doing the bulk of your messaging via written word, email, or text, keep in mind that tone doesn't convey well via written content. There's no inflection, there's no vocal anything. They're not seeing an expression on your face, so they can't tell as easily if you're happy, sad, upset, whatever. So a good practice for this is to make your messages sound positive to the point of feeling like you're being overly positive. When you're starting to make yourself sick from being too positive, that's probably when you've got the right thing going on. This is sad, but otherwise you risk coming across like a jerk. So, and it doesn't take little things to make it positive. It's a matter of just switching a few things around. So instead of saying we don't have the supplies needed to complete the project, try we lack the supplies needed to complete the project. You just want to take out these negatives. Instead of I'm not going to be available this Thursday because I have meetings all day, say I'm unavailable this Thursday due to pre-scheduled meetings. Please don't email me after 6 p.m. because I'm offline then. Say, please email me before 6 p.m. so I'll be sure to be online when your email arrives. Just little tweaks to how you say it, and trying to avoid the no's and the nots and anything that's got a contraction in it. Chances are there's a word. There is some word in the dictionary that replaces we don't have, we lack. I'm not going to be available. I'm unavailable. So try to keep it positive so people aren't misconveying what you're trying to say. Embrace the virtual meeting. I've heard more than a few complaints about virtual meetings in the past few months. Oh my God, I'm so tired of Zoom. I hear this from practically everybody I talk to. And I get it, believe me, I've been Zooming a lot myself. But this face-to-face time is really critical, especially when we have distributed teams like we do right now. So I encourage you really to try to make peace with it. I don't think this is going away soon. And even if the coronavirus were to go away a year from now completely and never come back, I think what's going on right now is going to change how we work. I see big changes in the workplace because of this. So it's good to just suck it up and try to love it as much as you can love it. Now, if you're not comfortable because the software is making you crazy, See if you can find a friend or a colleague that will log on with you so you can just play around in an informal setting and practice. You can do a Google search for whatever software you're using and see if you can find a blog article or a video on how to use it. Before I did this webinar, this is the first time in Zoom that I've attempted to show a slide deck, still see my speaker notes, and have the video up at the same time. I've done a lot of Zooming, but this is the first time presenting on Zoom. Amy says she'll play with Zoom on Zoom with anyone. There you go. So how I figured out how to do this webinar was to get on YouTube, find a tutorial, and then I got my husband. I sent my husband a Zoom invite and tested it with him, and it worked out just fine. If you're the meeting host, continue to use an agenda to keep the meeting on track, just like you would in a regular meeting. Log on a few minutes in advance so you can greet the early birds and chat a little bit. Don't multitask. When you're in a virtual meeting, be present. If you're checking your email on the side, even if you're bored out of your mind, people know. They know when you're not paying attention. I recommend using headphones to cut down on ambient noise. If you've got a less appealing background, we've talked about this, you can use a virtual background in Zoom. And be sure to speak up when you are at meetings. Greet people when you come in, say bye when you leave. If you have to step away, go to the bathroom or something for a minute, you don't have to interrupt the meeting. Just put, be right back or BRB in the chat or stepping away. If you have background noise, mute yourself until it's time to speak. If you sneeze, just say, excuse me, or bless you if somebody else sneezes. Manners are still important regardless of where the setting of the meeting is. Another thing to be careful of is resting face. Especially in a tool like Zoom where everybody's camera is on, but not just the person talking generally. And if you're like me and you naturally have what I call, what I've heard called bitchy resting face or murder resting face, you'll have to be mindful about keeping a neutral expression on. I have the kind of, I have this little, you see me smile a lot or try to turn my things up a lot because my natural resting expression is this. I look pissy, don't I? I look like a mat. Like I have this kind of mouth that just does this downturn at the edges. And I've got this new little wrinkle that's been developing since I hit 40 right here that just makes me look like I'm mad. It's my I call it my thrinkle. It's my thinking wrinkle. But if I sit there and do this because I'm thinking, I just look like I'm mad. So I have to be really mindful when I'm Zooming to have a neutral expression on my face. And you may have to practice in a mirror to get that down. Finally, expect that stuff happens and be prepared to apologize and laugh it off. Somebody's going to have a connectivity issue or your cat's going to walk in front of the screen. I have 5 cats, as I mentioned, so this is a fact of my life, despite my best efforts to keep them away. Embrace the imperfection and recognize that you cannot control the universe, despite anything or everything you've done to prepare. This photo here, this went viral, this video. This is from a recent United Kingdom Parliament virtual meeting. His cat walked in front of the video, and he simply apologized and said, and then he said, Rojo, put your tail down, and everybody laughed. And it was just such a beautiful way of handling it with grace. Okay, so this is everything. We have talked about workload management, clutter, thinking, and changing thinking into doing remote work tips. We've got 5 minutes for some questions and answers. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat. I know it's a lot too. Are you going to make the recorded version available, I'm assuming, Amy?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. That way people can review it. That's great. No questions? All right, so if there's no questions,
Oh.
All right, thank you, Susie. Take care. Good luck. I hope everything works out well. Okay, well, if there's no questions, I have a challenge for everybody before I leave you for the day. And here is the challenge. When this webinar is over, go to the website www.futureme.org. Just like it's spelled there, futureme.org. And using this tool, you can write a letter to an email, send an email to your future self using this tool. And what I'd like you to do is write an email reminding yourself of the biggest takeaway from this webinar and what it is that you want to work on the most. And then set the delivery date for 6 months from now, from today, so that in half a year from now, you can remember what it is you said you wanted to work on from this email, and this email will pop into your mailbox to remind you, and you can see what kind of progress you've made and revisit that. So this is your challenge when you get off the webinar. And finally, thank you to everybody who attended. I hope you've gotten some use from it. I hope you've got some good ideas and things you can use. Please feel free to get in touch anytime. My email address is cindy@cindyleonardconsulting.com. The website's the same, cindyleonardconsulting.com. And phone number is 724-610-9504. If you use that to text me, you might want to say who you are, because if I don't know who you are, it might just get deleted because I'll think it's a crazy spam person. But thank you again. Thank you, Amy. And good luck, everybody. I hope all goes well. And let's just all keep praying that things improve in terms of our economy and our country and everything else. So take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. We really appreciated it. And thank you, everybody. Please keep in touch with me as well. And I'll be sending out an evaluation for the program. Please send that, fill that out for me. It only takes about 2 minutes, and I really do look at them and I make adjustments based on them. So if you would take the time to fill that out for me, I'd really appreciate it. And we'll attach all the PDFs as promised to the email as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.